Good evening. My name is Shalom Mandeville. Today, I'd like to show you a tape which I received from Red Sweeney of Department of Fisheries and Oceans. It's a very interesting tape, and it's about fisheries habitat and their life cycles. So please watch the show and enjoy yourself. Thank you.
Canada's fisheries are a significant source of recreation and food, and the basis of a traditional way of life. Since a vital ingredient in the generation of these economic and social benefits is the maintenance of healthy fish habitat, it follows that fish habitat management is an important part of the work of the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. This means a comprehensive approach to fisheries management that includes not only the conservation but also the restoration and development of fish habitats to support the fisheries of the future. Canada's fish habitats are as varied as the species that inhabit them. Although few people recognize a salt marsh as a fish habitat, nutrients from marshes greatly enhance the productivity of the marine environment. Plankton and other microscopic organisms feed on this material and in turn are eaten by small fish, which support the marine life stages of our anadromous species, such as sea trout, Gaspereau, and Atlantic salmon. Although these muddy estuaries are not often perceived as ideal fish habitats, they are holding areas for fish returning from the sea and are the areas most often fished by commercial drift net fishermen. The mouths of rivers above the head of tide are also important fish habitat for certain species. Smelt migrate up to these areas in early spring to spawn. Some striped bass also spawn in these lower portions of the river, while other species swim further upstream. All rivers are in a dynamic state as they try to adjust their grade to sea level through natural processes of scour and erosion. Stream banks are usually very stable, and pools may remain in place for many years. These areas are sanctuaries for fish of many species, as low summer flows cause upstream areas to become too shallow for fish, and water temperatures also rise to unacceptable levels. Meanders are found where rivers flow through flat gradient areas and help to dissipate excessive energy. Strong currents on the outside of a bend cause erosion, while material is deposited on the inside of the turn. The headwater section of a watershed is an area where small streams, rivulets, and gullies link up to form a well-defined channel. Rainwater and seepage from springs is collected and flows with ever-increasing speed until stream channels are carved out of the rock. They are usually cool, heavily forested areas full of woody debris and are ideal fish habitat areas for speckled trout. Salmon do not spawn randomly throughout a section of stream, but select very specific areas which will ensure the maximum survival rate for the developing eggs. Areas selected are often at the head of a riffle or the tail of a pool, where water velocities tend to downwell or flow into the substrate. This is to ensure that a good supply of oxygen is available to the eggs, and waste metabolic products can be flushed away by the current. Clean gravel or cobble is the preferred spawning material to provide interstitial spaces where the young sac fry have room to develop, safe from predators. If all these conditions are met, the female salmon moves onto the spawning riffle to deposit her eggs. Turning on her side, she repeatedly makes several powerful strokes with her tail to dig a red, or depression, 12 to 18 inches deep in the gravel. The male stays nearby to drive off other intruders. When the female is satisfied with the red, she settles into the depression, the male moves in beside her, and the eggs and sperm are released. She then moves immediately upstream to create a similar depression, which will bury the previously deposited eggs and create an area in which to spawn again. This procedure is followed until all the eggs have been buried in the gravel. The adults, now known as kelts, may drop downstream to a pool to rest for a few weeks, or the female may leave and the male remain in the pool. In some large rivers, the fish may overwinter in the pool, while in smaller streams, the fish return to the ocean. The eggs incubate in the gravel over winter, safe from predators and freezing. Hatching usually occurs in about 110 days at a water temperature of 4 degrees Celsius, which is usually in late April. But the young remain buried in the gravel, absorbing the yolk sac. They finally emerge from the gravel in late May or early June as free-swimming parr. The young salmon are now most vulnerable to predation from trout, eels, mergansers, and kingfishers. The fish spend between 2 and 5 years in the stream. They have distinctive markings, and their sharply forked tail distinguishes them from juvenile brook trout. Before leaving for the sea, the fish, now known as smolt, take on a silvery appearance, and the tail becomes less forked. The juvenile fish emerge from the gravel in early summer and immediately move to the edges and backwater portions of the river, where water velocities are very low. As they grow, they can tolerate faster currents, and by the time they are 1 year old, the fish are about 7 centimeters long and are able to utilize the slower riffle areas of the stream. Here, the substrate provides plenty of depressions and holes where they can defend their territories and feed without exposing themselves to danger. Vegetation along the stream banks provides shade in the summer, thus helping to maintain the cool water temperatures the young fish prefer. In late fall, the roots help bind the soil and prevent serious erosion during flooding, while in winter they prevent damage from drifting ice. Parr, 2 years of age or older, can withstand higher velocities than smaller fish, and so move into the fast, deep riffles where suitable habitat is available. During periods of low flow, all fish are forced to move into the relatively deep water of pools, which they use as a sanctuary, until rains bring higher water levels, enabling them to move back into their territories. The substrate size of river bottoms is directly influenced by the underlying bedrock. Rivers flowing over soft, easily erodible material often have silt or sand bottoms, which will not support Atlantic salmon, while harder rock produces fast-flowing rivers, cascading in a series of ledges, rapids, and falls. These areas can support salmon, since the boulders and projecting rock produce a maze of currents and back eddies. Areas of suitable velocity, although not as plentiful as in a cobbled gravel stream, still permit a dispersion of fish across the river. Large parr are often found in the middle areas of strongest current, while small parr seek refuge behind boulders. Here, all the physical factors of an ideal fish habitat ensure the success of the species. Water flows must be high enough to provide cover and keep the substrate clean of silt and algae. Dissolved oxygen is replenished by water flowing over the rocks, and the vegetation along the shore provides shade for cooling and are also an important source of food, as terrestrial insects drop from the branches into the water below. Speckled trout are often found in the same river systems as Atlantic salmon, but use a wider range of habitat. Trout can be found in smaller meadow streams with mud and silt bottoms, as well as rock-bound pools at the base of falls and rapids. Juvenile trout are often found in small headwater feeder streams where they seek cool, clear water. As water temperatures rise above 20 degrees Celsius, the fish move out of the streams into lakes or large pools seeking cooler water. Spawning normally takes place in upwellings from springs. Fisheries workers can determine the presence or absence of fish in a particular stream by using a technique known as electroseining. The transistorized unit on the operator's back creates an electrical current which is transferred to the water by means of a long-handled probe. A floating ground completes the circuit. When fish enter the electrical field, normal nerve impulses are blocked by the current, and the fish involuntarily swims toward the probe. At close range, the fish is immobilized and easily caught in the dip net. Once removed from electrical current or field, it recovers unharmed by the procedure. This technique is effective for capturing trout around snags and undercut banks where other means of capture are ineffective. Electroseining is used to determine the density or number of fish per unit area of stream. The section of interest is blocked off at the upper and lower ends using fine mesh barrier nets, which restrict the movement of fish in or out of the section. The crew then seine the section in a methodical pattern, starting at the upper barrier net. A lip seine is held in position below the seining team and captures any fish drifting toward it. After each complete sweep of the section, the number of fish captured and the species composition are recorded. 3 sweeps of the area are required to provide data to determine population density, age class structure, and species composition. This information is used to assess the importance of the stream as a producer of juvenile fish. The absence or low density of a particular age class can also be an indicator of problems. For example, if very few fish of a year class are found, it indicates that the previous year's spawning run of adults did not occur, or that floods may have destroyed the reds. Electroseining can help identify rivers that need artificial stocking from hatchery fish. Such rivers may have more good habitat available than is reflected by their populations. A large proportion of a fish's time is spent feeding. Rather than actively seeking out food organisms like terrestrial species, the water currents bring food to the fish. In this way, the fish can maintain a territory, rising up to catch its prey, then quickly descending to safety. Aquatic invertebrates are commonly found on the underside of stones on the stream bottom. They are the primary food source of trout and juvenile salmon. Found in a variety of shapes and sizes, from the 4.5 centimeter long dragonfly nymph to the microscopic midge larvae, they all require cool, clean, well-oxygenated water to survive. Some species, like the caddisfly, build cases of stones or small sticks and permanently attach themselves to the substrate, while others are very mobile. Fish are able to maintain territories and still access an abundant food supply due to the phenomenon of invertebrate drift. At night, large numbers of insects abandon their positions and drift downstream with the currents. Experiments have shown that these insects can move up to 38 meters before reattaching, and thus provide a mobile food source for the waiting fish. While juvenile salmon occupy positions in the open sections of the stream, trout are almost always associated with some form of cover, where they feel secure from predators. Larger trout are often in deep pools where logs and trees have created an underwater tangle of roots and branches. Brown trout especially prefer to seek cover in the dark crevices of undercut banks. Natural stream erosion scours out the soft material, leaving the upper portion of bank, which is held together by the thick root mass. These holes often extend in over 2 meters, and the fish hide in these areas during the day and move out to feed at night. This particular type of overhead cover is a very important criterion for good brown trout habitat. As long as the stream remains relatively undisturbed, it will continue to produce healthy fish populations. When streams are altered by man, however, habitat conditions quickly change, and fish populations can be completely destroyed. River floodplains provide the best agricultural lands in the region. Rich alluvial soils has built up over the years as annual floods cause the rivers to jump their banks and deposit silt loads on the land. Although rich, their proximity to the river channel means that this land is very wet and must be ditched and channelized to optimize agricultural potential. Agricultural ditching can cause complete and irreversible destruction of fish habitat. Stream bottoms and banks are destroyed, vegetation is removed, and exposed cuts are long-term sources of siltation. Excessive silt loads are one of the most destructive forces affecting fish habitat. Soil particles in suspension can not only clog, but also abrade fish gills, causing death by suffocation. Silt fills the spaces between the larger material so that it cannot be used by spawning fish. If heavy siltation occurs after eggs have been deposited, the oxygen supply is cut off, and the eggs will die. This can destroy an entire year class of fish. Since mitigation techniques to lessen the damage caused by in-stream ditching are of limited effectiveness, this method of land drainage should only be considered as a last resort. Parallel ditching, drainage tiles, or other methods can often accomplish the same purpose without having as severe an impact on fish habitat. Channelization is often proposed as a solution for flooding and erosion caused by storm events or ice jams. The wholesale manipulation of rivers by bulldozers and other heavy equipment can have a devastating effect on the fisheries resource. In addition to siltation, the new channel is very unstable. Erosion and deposition occur as the new channel attempts to readjust its gradient to a new equilibrium. This can result in upstream scouring and downstream deposition so that areas of river not directly affected by the channelization are reduced in value as fish habitat. The freshly bulldozed berms of river gravel, which now form the banks, are often covered with large quarried rock, or riprap, to prevent their being eroded away. This material, while stabilizing the bank, severely restricts the reestablishment of streamside vegetation and eliminates undercut banks and snags, which were important elements of fish habitat. A gravel mining operation, although still on the floodplain, is located a considerable distance from the river. However, the silt-laden water manages to find its way into the river, where it quickly clouds the water and results in a slow, steady, downstream degradation of water quality. The silt is just as damaging to downstream areas as if the machinery were working directly in the watercourse. To control silt, gravel dikes and berms can be constructed, or the silt-laden water can be diverted into ponds where the suspended sediment can settle out. Such control measures are inexpensive and easy to install. It should be remembered that once rivers are contaminated, it is difficult or impossible to remove silt without causing more damage. As forest harvesting techniques have become more mechanized over the last few decades, the potential for environmental damage has increased. Vast clear-cuts, which are now the most economical method for timber harvesting, have the potential to change runoff characteristics within the watershed and cause extreme temperature fluctuations in the small headwater streams. This can result in shifts in fish species composition as stable habitats are disrupted. Although old techniques resulted in damage through log driving on major rivers and a proliferation of small dams, the mechanized timber harvesters of today create new and more serious problems. While oxen and horses could remove the timber without the necessity of roads, powerful skidders create their own as they drag the timber to points where it can be removed by trucks. These skid trails, if located near or across streams, become ditches, leading runoff directly into watercourses. Silt and scour and erosion from the machinery in the stream can destroy the spawning and nursery areas for salmon and trout. If streams must be crossed, temporary log bridges or culverts should be installed, and diversion ditches constructed to carry surface runoff into the woods away from streams. The complete removal of a forest canopy increases overall runoff. In summer, trees consume large quantities of water directly, and shading reduces evaporation from the soil. In winter, tree cover retards snowmelt and reduces soil freezing. All of this extends runoff periods and reduces flood peaks, which cause abnormal bedload movements, shift and displace spawning gravel, and destroy habitat for both aquatic insects and juvenile fish. Detrimental effects of forestry can be minimized by reducing the size of clear cuts and by the provision of green belts along the sides of streams. Green belts reduce siltation and provide shade to stabilize water temperatures and maintain a food source for fish. Pasturing of livestock can also lead to the deterioration of fish habitat. When shrubs and trees are removed from stream banks to create pasture land, the banks no longer have a strong root network to bind the soil, and slumping and erosion will occur at high flows. When streams are not fenced, cattle trample and destroy the banks and stream bottom, and a once stable stream becomes a raw gully through the field. If streamside vegetation is encouraged and livestock access is limited to specific watering and crossing areas, both the fisheries and agricultural resources can coexist. Culverts are the most commonly used structures for crossing streams less than 3 meters in width. If improperly installed or designed, they can cause physical blockages, velocity barriers, erosion of stream banks, downstream scour, and the direct loss of fish habitat. Physical disturbances of the stream associated with culvert installation can result in pollution from oil and diesel fuel, direct alteration of fish habitat, sedimentation downstream of the installation, and blockage of fish passage. Accepted guidelines for installing culverts must be carefully followed to minimize damage to fish habitat. Culverts can be barriers to migrating fish. If the downstream end of the culvert is above the original stream bottom, then fish may be unable to jump into these structures. Problems associated with high and low water flows may be solved by placing baffles in the culvert. Highway culverts are often installed in ravines and require huge amounts of fill. To prevent erosion, check dams of crushed rock or other material should be installed across ditches to serve as velocity breaks and small settling ponds. Where possible, ditches should be diverted into the woods at the top of the grade to lessen the amount of water flowing down the slope. Banks must be stabilized as soon as possible. The most common technique for this is hydroseeding, with a prepared seed mixture which is fast-growing and which will bind the loose soil particles. Bank failure can create massive sediment problems. Obstructions restrict fish from using suitable upstream habitat. While natural waterfalls tend to isolate populations, man-made dams can disrupt historical runs of anadromous fish. In addition, fish migrating downstream are often forced to pass through turbines. Here, the turbine blades physically damage or kill large numbers of fish, and rapid pressure changes can cause internal damage to eye sockets and swim bladders. Upstream fish passage can be provided by the construction of fishways. These structures create an artificial channel as a series of steps around the dam. As long as sufficient water is available to allow for efficient operation, and attraction flows are properly located to draw fish away from the tail race discharge, these structures can preserve the resource. Even with efficient fish passage, large dams often flood out critical spawning and nursery areas, and this loss of habitat will result in reduced populations. This wide, flat area of the river valley is called a floodplain, and is as natural a part of the river as the actual stream channel. It is here that the energy from floodwaters is dissipated as streams overflow their banks and sediment loads and accumulated debris is deposited. During spring breakup, they serve as receptacles for ice that is carried downstream by swollen rivers. These areas, when viewed during low summer flows, are often very attractive to development such as housing subdivisions, stream crossings, pipelines, and factories. Costs are low, because of the ease of construction, and aesthetic values are high when properties are located next to watercourses. In the past, restrictions to floodplain development have been minimal, with sometimes severe damage to fish habitat. These floods and ice jams can cause millions of dollars in property damage, and there is also a real threat to life as the rivers try to reclaim the lost floodplain. With a massive investment in these properties, more and more manipulation of the river occurs. Massive flood control devices, such as dikes and channelization projects, try to restrict the flow to the main channel. This often results in passing the problem downstream, where the disruptive techniques must be repeated with further damage to fish habitat. Industrialization and development on floodplains must be carefully designed and monitored to ensure that no damage to the adjacent watercourse occurs. If a sufficient buffer strip is maintained, then the potential for damage is reduced. Development far removed from an aquatic resource can still cause unexpected and long-term damage. Much of southwestern Nova Scotia is underlain by slate bedrock. If it is necessary to excavate this material, it is essential that surface runoff be controlled. Extensive chemical treatment facilities may be required to neutralize the acid content and toxic heavy metals in the effluent, which can destroy any stream into which it flows. Every storm event leaches new toxins out of the rock, and persistent and long-term problems can occur. Ditches and holding ponds must be constructed to prevent surface runoff from leaving the excavation site. Stopping habitat loss at its current level is not enough if Canadians want to regain lost ground and to develop and expand important fisheries. In recognition of this, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is now directly involved in restoration and development programs aimed at expanding available fish habitats. As these programs continue, it will be necessary to bring together all concerned parties to identify local problems and opportunities. It is out of these discussions that solutions will arise to the problems of maintaining and improving the quality of fish habitats. The end goal is to support Canada's important fisheries for present and future generations.